We are continuing with arguments against presentism, this time based on the claim of presentism that only the present exists. So the future and the past does not exist. But then you can raise some objections. Well, if they don't exist, then what makes statements about the past and future true? It seems often we want to say something true about a chair or a rock or something, and we can go and check it, etc. But if they don't exist, how can statements about them be true? That's question number one. How can we be related to things in the past if they do not exist, and how can we refer to them? It seems that if you want to be related to something, it must exist. And if you want to refer to it, it must also exist. But how is that possible then if they don't exist? And finally, how can events in the past cause events now if the events in the past doesn't exist? Maybe you think that these are all strange objections. Maybe you have an answer to them or not. For instance, Joshua Mussorgsky is a person who uses these questions as arguments against presentism and say that obviously they must exist if these things are to make sense, but then we must say that the past and the future exists like the present. We can't just say that the present moment is the only thing that exists. So let's have a look at these objections by starting on taking a look at what we mean by the past and the future. I've said that time is this even motion, and we can make a measurement out of it by dividing it up into parts, days and years and hours and minutes, etc. And then we can imagine then this timeline stretching back in time. So we can imagine, for instance, 2 years ago, so that's when the Earth had made 2 rounds around the sun, or it had rotated around itself 730 times. That could be used to define a point of time 2 years ago, because now the present moment exists. Certain values are actualized here in the fundamental field, but then some other values were actualized, and we can talk about, well, 2 years ago then we celebrated your birthday, or these and those values were actualized in the world, and we can describe that. So this is a way of talking about the past, what was actualized in the past. We can do the same for the future. We can stretch the timeline and imagine the Earth in orbit around the Sun 2 times. So how will it be 2 years in the future? But then we're just making hypotheses about what is possible. But that hasn't happened yet. Nothing has been actualized, so we're guessing, and it could be either this or that. Since we live in an indeterminate world, it's a description of a possibility when we talk about the future. Now we can answer these questions. First, what makes a statement about the past true? Well, something was actualized in the world. These are data that we can integrate in a big theory about what has happened in the world. So if we have this big theory that describes the whole evolution and history of the world, then there is a most coherent description of this, which is the true description. And if a statement about the past is part of this true description, then that statement about the past is true. What about the future? Well, statements about the future, they don't have truth value, because they say that something will exist and it or happen, and that hasn't happened yet. So we don't know. The world is indeterminate, so we have to wait and see what actually is actualized. But the statements can be highly probable. I can say, for instance, that it's my T-shirt will be blue in 1 second from now. And there it is. Yep, it was blue, so that was highly probable. But there was a slight possibility that the roof had fallen down with something making my T-shirt red or something. So it wasn't. It didn't have truth value. It didn't express something about the world at that time, but it can still be very probable. How can we relate to and refer to things in the past if they don't exist? Well, we can relate to and refer to ideas in our mind. They don't have to exist outside of it in order to be able to refer to it or to relate to it. And if we then say something or think something true about it, it is a successful reference or relating. And I described what makes them true. So that's already covered. How can events in the past cause events now? We've also covered this when we looked at causality, etc. So laws of nature cause events now, and they take past events into account. What has happened with this electron, etc. matters for what happens further. But we don't need there to be something in the past somewhere emitting causal powers. This is enough to describe and explain everything that happens. So it's quite easy to answer all these questions, and thus presentism is still defended well against these objections.